Hello everybody, welcome back to Future Fiber. This is a channel where I talk about all the crafty things that I do. It is mostly knitting. In today's video, I will be doing a little bit of a post 1 year review on the Centro knitting machine. It's been a little over a year since I put out that video with my initial thoughts on this. If you're curious on that, I'll link it somewhere. I wanted to make this video to kind of look back at my year and see if any of my thoughts have kind of changed on this. I bought mine on Amazon for, I would say at the time it was about $50. I think there are kinds that are cheaper, and the Loops and Threads brand that Michaels also sells a version of this, and also Addy has a more expensive version which is supposed to be a little bit sturdier. So those are some of the options and varieties of this machine that you can get. Mine has Kermit stickers in it. I've used this quite a bit, but it's in decent shape. It's a little beat up for reasons that I will kind of explain in a little bit. Just start off with my sentiments on it after a year. I still think it's worth the money. For $50, I think this has been worth the $50 for me personally. I've used this machine quite a bit in the last year, mostly to make a lot of gift knit. I use this a lot during Christmas season to make a lot of hats, a lot of scarves. And I will say that right off the bat, this machine is plastic. You can't expect it to do really complicated stitches, or you can't expect it to work with all types of yarns and things like that. But if you want a machine that can do more things, then you should get a flatbed knitting machine. You'll see that with a lot of my projects, it's not really that complicated. It's basically all the projects are variations of a tube, and that's really what it's designed for. If you want to make just simple projects, then get this machine. This is what that's designed for, not necessarily making garments and things like that. There's very specific set of yarns that I would say that this machine is designed for. I think if you want more flexibility in the type of fibers you can use, things like that, then this is not really the machine for you. If you put a yarn that doesn't work for this machine into it, it will not work. And I think it's the same with all types of different knitting machines too. Like, you wouldn't expect a circular sock knitting machine to take bulky weight yarn. It's the same thing with this. It's a plastic thing. It's like asking a 5-year-old to run a marathon. You really shouldn't do that. So I have some suggestions of yarns that have worked really well for me in the past in the machine. I think generally my favorite category of yarns to work with in the Centro knitting machine is bulky weight, fluffy, bouncy yarn. I think generally acrylic works really well in the machine because acrylic tends to be very soft. Well, not all acrylic is soft, but you know, a lot of the yarns that you can get at Michaels or Joann's or craft stores tend to be soft because it's machine washable, and so a lot of people use them for baby knits and things like that. So they tend to be softer than like wool or other natural fibers. So I think that sleekness really helps in going through the feeder, yarn feeder. I will say the best yarn that goes through the machine is actually the yarn that comes with the machine. So that little bit of sample yarn that they give you, I will keep that and use that as, you know, your starter yarn, like your scrap yarn to start, or ravel cord. It came with the thing, so it's designed to work for the thing, and there is a reason. It's, if you touch it, you will know it's very sleek. It almost feels like it has a layer of oil on it, and you know, this happens with yarns that come on cones. Like, they have that spinning oil added to it so that it'll go through machines easier. So anything that is like super soft and sleek, and also it needs to have a little bit of compression or bounce to the yarn, which is why my favorite category of yarn to use is actually kind of like these blown, almost chainette style yarns. This is Lion brand, Feels Like Bliss, and it has a lot of fuzz to it. This is a bulky weight yarn in its original categorization, but you can tell that, like, me just yanking on it sideways, it has a decent amount of stretch to it. That really helps with evening out the stitches and even if there's a little bit of tension going through the yarn, it has enough give to it so that the yarn can go over the hooks easy without it like snagging or getting stuck or anything. Just 100% wool that isn't like plied in a springy way will not have a chance in this machine, so I wouldn't even attempt it. Don't do it. You will just hate the process. So something like this works really well. So this is Lion Brand Feels Like Bliss, another type of yarn that works really well if you want a little bit of a bougier option. This is Wonder Fluff from Knit Picks. This is 70% baby alpaca, 23% nylon, and 7% merino wool. But I will say what gives it that advantage, I suppose, of working in the machine is not actually its fiber content. The nylon, I'm sure, helps. There's like a nylon chain or core, and then the yarn is kind of like blown in and around it. So it has this level of compression to the yarn that isn't present in like typically plied yarns. So I think that helps it glide through really well. And this doesn't have as much stretch or bounce kind of vertically in the yarn. But if you, it's hard to describe without you actually feeling the yarn, but like if you just press it, it has a lot of compression. So it has a lot of dead space in the yarn, I suppose, a lot of space that you can use in the machine to kind of compress as it goes through the machines, but then once you've knit up the whole thing, it kind of fills out and makes the stitches look really, really even. So this is another favorite of mine. So any other yarns like this are really good. I will say Drops Air is probably another really good alternative for Wonder Fluff. Anything that is like bulky weight. I think originally what's recommended for use is like kind of like worsted, Aran weight acrylic yarns previously. Those work really well, but the reason why I recommend these kind of bulkier yarns that have a little bit of springiness and compression to it is because I feel like that makes the best type of fabric in terms of denseness. Plymouth Yarns Ariado is another type of bulky weight blown chainette yarn that you can use. And then the last one that I've used that also works well is the Karen Latte Cakes. This is good because it comes in like a really large volume, and it has these like eyelash bits. The fluffy bits will kind of fill in the gaps. So while the core of the yarn isn't as thick as this is just straight up bulky, you can tell, it will still fill in the gaps of the fabric. So it will make a loose but visually dense fabric. So I think that's why this works well as well. So those are my 3 recommendations, 3 or 4 or 5, whatever, however you view it. I will give you an example of what does not work well in this machine. Actually, you can do it. It'll just be harder. So this is acrylic yarn as well. This is a chenille yarn that I got from Michaels. I got this because I thought it would work well in the machine, but it doesn't, because while the texture is right, it's soft, but chenille does have that slight bit of grip and friction to it, which doesn't actually make it go super well in the machine. And it's a little bit too thin, and most importantly, it doesn't have any compression. Okay, now let's talk about projects. Basically, all the projects I've made since my first cardigan project, which I will show you here again, since this cardigan project, have all been variations of a tube. I don't want to knit a project like this on the sentro because I'm already knitting so much of it by hand. That's one reason. But another has to do with the weight of yarn that I think works best on the sentro. You can see here, the stitches, especially after having blocked it, are pretty even. And they're even on wear as well. And it's honestly like not that bad, but you can see that it's kind of net-like. It's very loose, the gauge, because this yarn, this is Wendy with Wool and Wendy with Wool Tweed. And this is a worsted Aran weight yarn. And you can see that this is what that looks like on the sentro. That's why a lot of the sentro projects have you double up on the fabric, like the beanie that is like sentro first ever project. I hate that project because I think it looks like crap, honestly. And it doesn't fit anyone's head. I got a big noggin, it doesn't fit me. It'll fit a child. It's like a good intro to the machine, but I wouldn't continue to make those hats necessarily. I have some other hats that I think are frankly a little bit better than that. But anyway, that's why they have you double up on the fabric, because it's see-through. See, like if it's doubled up, then you're gonna get less of the, you're gonna see less of the netting. And if you pull it, it looks like that. And I just don't love that look. I like this cardigan, and I haven't thrown it out for that reason, but you know, it's not the most special, the best piece of work that I've done. And I just don't love seaming, I'll be honest. And you do have to seam if you want to make a sweater or any type of garment, like a wearable like top thing. So that's another reason why I haven't really worked with the Centro on making garments. But I have 3 project types that I think work well on the Centro. The first type of project that works well is a variation on a hat. I've made much better versions of this, and I have a specific yarn recommendation for this as well, but I think these cat hats work really well on the Centro. Basically, it's a tube. It's a tube, and you just Kitchener the top. There's a couple of ways that you can make this. The preferred method for me is to knit a couple rows of tube, an amount of length that I want to have doubled up to make this folded hem. And then I take the starting edge of the hat, and then I hang the hem as I knit the row, so that I am combining the stitches up as I am knitting. I will link a video tutorial to how to do that, but if you don't want to do that, you can just knit a tube, and then once you have taken the tube off of the machine, you can just slip stitch or knit together the bottom edge to the inside of the hat. And then the top, I recommend Kitchener stitch or some sort of like invisible grafting so that the top of the hat is continuous. But if you don't want to do that, or if you are not a knitter and you somehow ended up on this video, then you can just do a crochet slip stitch or any kind of other method to join the top of the hat together, and that makes a kitty hat. Really simple, a variation on a tube. And you will see that a lot of these projects are just variations on a tube, and it makes these kitty ears. So I made this with loops and threads, Color Craft. It's like the cheapest acrylic yarn that you can get at Michael's. So you can work with this, but it gives you not the best result because it gives you some drop stitches if you're not careful. So I will insert some photos of other versions of this hat that I made with Feels Like Bliss, and I think that I like that a lot better. But this is the cat hat. So that's type number 1. Type number 2 are scarves. I think nowadays the type of scarves that are really popular are these kind of wider tube scarves that are double-sided and have tassels on the bottom. And a knitting pattern that you could use to make is the Berlin scarf. It's by Polystrict, and it's been a popular knitting pattern for a while now, but I made this version of that Berlin scarf, or double-sided tube scarf with tassels on the end, with the Centro knitting machine. And this is literally just all 48 pegs, tubes on the Centro knitting machine, and you crank whatever length you want. This is about 200-300 rows, and you just go until you get the desired length. And then at the end, once you've taken the scarf off the machine, then you add these tassels. If you're not into knitting, then or if you've not really knit before, you can also do, I guess, crochet I-cord Or you can just hang regular tassels with cut up pieces of yarn, and then maybe braid the edges so that you can get some sort of tassel here. But what I did is I-cord for these tassels. That's why they're not even, because I knit them all individually. But yeah, there's a ton of tutorials on how to make these with the sentro. So this is scarf number 1. So once you've mastered this, tube scarf on the sentro, then I have a variation on a theme for you. So a scarf hood. And how I made this is you can see that the scarf part is just a tube. This just has different colors in it. And the actual hood part is just a rectangle, a flat panel of rectangle that is knit to desired length and folded over and then seamed in the back. And then it is grafted to the scarf. So what I do is fold the scarf in half, find the midway point of the scarf, and then find the midway point in the back of the hood. And here I also have a drawstring that's attached. This is optional, but you could have a drawstring, or you could knit a little section of rib around your face so that the wind stays out of your face a little bit better. I opted for a drawstring, and you can make the channel by turning in the open edge of the panel inwards and then just like stitching it to the rest of the hood, and then you can just snake through a cord through that channel that you just made, and I just have it coming out of some random stitch. So this is a variation on a theme, and this is my snood that I made with the Sentro knitting machine. And lastly, but definitely not least, I have a little bit of a different project. This is a dumpling bag. And you can see that one side is shorter than the other. This is also knit with using Lion Brand Feels Like Bliss. And what I like about this is that it's bicolor. You also don't have to make the straps different lengths. They can be the same length, but the idea here is that you just have like a little fuzzy little bag, fuzzy little knit bag. And this is also really easy because it's just like panels, You can also do this on tube if you wish. I think if you did it in the tube way and it was single colored, it would be a lot easier than making this bicolored. But yeah, so that's just some ideas. Those are just some project ideas that you can do with the Sentro. I think as long as you can think of something that's like a variation on a tube, the project will be really easy to achieve. And hopefully that gives you a couple of different ideas for what you can do with the machine. And if you were contemplating buying it, these are some things that you can make with the Sentro. I personally really enjoyed all the time that I spent on it, trying to make different things. I will say, like, the learning curve is not as low as I initially expected when I bought the machine, but it's been a fun challenge kind of working with it. I think my favorite thing about the machine is its limitations. So the limitations that the machine has kind of gets me to think a little bit differently, a little bit creatively about what I want to make. Like, for example, if I want to make a bag, then I have to think about what kind of materials would work with the machine, plus what kind of shape of the bag I can create without doing too much work. So all of those things combined kind of makes it a fun little challenge. But if you don't really like that, maybe machine knitting is not really exactly for you. That's part of the reason why I haven't really made any more garments with the machine since the first ever cardigan video that I put out about the Sentro, because it's just, for me, a lot of the times just doing the math of figuring out the shape of the shoulders and things like that has never been really my favorite part of knitting, and it's harder to just knit off of vibes and figure it out as you go. With the Centro, you can be off by like a couple like stitches and stuff, but I think this is just like machine knitting as a whole. It works a different part of your brain than just knitting by hand, so I will keep that in mind. Hopefully that helps you decide a little bit if you are the right type of person to buy one of these. And also, like, it's $50. Like, yes, it's not insignificant amount of money, but it's an easier investment than a flatbed knitting machine. So if you know that you're already like mechanically minded and you want to do like more complicated garments, definitely I would just go for the flatbed. But this is for people like me who want a little thing to crank out scarves, hats, last minute so that you can give them to a friend's baby or something like that. Now let's talk about the durability of the machine. It's plastic, so it's not going to be very durable. And mine's in okay shape. It's not the best shape. It's a little rough around the edges. I will say another thing. I think I mentioned this in the first video, but the panel mode and the tube mode, it doesn't really matter. I knit panels in tube mode because I want that extra room to go beyond the last stitch, I suppose. So I knit everything in tube mode, and then if you do knit panels, then I just have a clicker that I use, a mechanical clicker, and I don't rely on this. This guy isn't very good anyway, so, and if you're knitting like a scarf or something, it doesn't really matter. So that's that. My handle, it's got a lot of dust around it. It's okay, but part of the reason why it's in this kind of beat up state is because I did end up getting an electric drill attachment to the handle. So it's like a cup shape. I wish I had it to show you, but I can't find it for some reason. But it just, you've seen it. It just sits into the handle base here. And then it has a hex thing that goes into an electric drill. And then you just, use the electric drill. It works fine. My only thing with that is just be careful. Go slow at the start for multiple reasons. One is you don't want the yarn to snag or drop any stitches, and then you are already like 6 rows down, and it's going to be really difficult to fix at that point. Another thing is with friction, because this handle is causing friction as it's spinning. Higher friction means what? Heat. So if you don't do a good job of really leveling out your drill against, it has to be kind of perpendicular against the machine. You risk melting the handle, the base of the handle to the main body. This is spoken from experience. Do not do it. Go slow. You can fix it with an X-Acto knife. Just, cut around the plastic and it'll just move and, fall apart. But be mindful of that. Go slower to start with, and you wouldn't have this problem. But if you smell burning plastic, that might be why. Another tool that might be helpful, you don't have to have this, but if you feel like it's harder to start your knit in the machine, maybe look into, well, first of all, maybe knitting more on the scrap yarn before you start with the main yarn, but also getting these claw weights. These are used on the flatbed knitting machines, but you can still use it on these. You can just kind of like go like this on the fabric and it'll pull it down. I usually put like 3 or 4 of these around to start, and it pulls the fabric down enough. And once you have like an inch or 2 going, then you just take it off and it's fine. But this has been helpful in getting a little bit more even tension in the stitches. So if you want to invest, I will say this is a pretty good investment. Oh, another thing that I will recommend is actually C-clamps. So you can see that mine are missing the rubber suction cup feet. These don't do anything, by the way. They don't do anything. And especially because I don't really have a lot of, I don't know, all my furniture is kind of wood, so it's not going to stick to wood. So what I do is I have these metal C-clamps. I would show you one, but it's currently clamped to my desk onto something else, so I'm not going to do that. But I have a C-clamp, and then I C-clamp the base to the base of the desk that I'm working on, and it holds it pretty well. Yeah, so those are some of my tips, tools that you might want to get in addition to this basic machine. So another tip that I have is in this yarn feeder here. This guy is very finicky. How I usually thread this machine is as it goes through the yarn feeder, I only put the yarn through one of these pegs. Honestly, the different sizes don't really do anything. They're all the same. Like, you can put it through two, but I feel like that just causes like unnecessary tension, and as you're working with the machine, it'll kind of like undo itself anyways. But the big thing is the yarn that is being fed into the machine, just make sure that you are tensioning it with your hand like this. And I will say that plays a bigger role than, you know, whatever this little thing is. This also breaks a lot, so this is plastic. But if you are maintaining the tension with your hands, then you are giving it a bit of chance to catch anything that will snag in the machine before it actually gets into the machine, if you know what I mean. So I will say that helps more than using the yarn feeder. And by doing that, you can kind of control how fast your yarn will feed into the machine and things like that. So, but the yarns that I did recommend, the two bulky yarns especially, those are so low friction that you can use those yarns with the electric drill attachment on the handle, and you wouldn't have to worry about it catching anywhere. I will say, as a final note, my experience with the machine has been overall positive. So if you were on the fence about it, hopefully this helps you make a decision. And let me know if you have any questions. I'll try my best to answer them or direct you to a better resource than me. And I'll see you guys in the next one.